Right. Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. This is S4A live stream number 27 being recorded on July 7, 2022. We don't have a lot on the agenda today. We're going to do a COVID update. We're going to talk a little bit about monkeypox. Otherwise, it's just sort of open chat. There's a lot of people in the chat right now, and we're going to just have a discussion. The channel has been growing quite a bit recently. Actually, we picked up about 600 new subscribers on the YouTube channel. youtube.com/socialism for all, FORALL. So welcome, first of all, to everybody. Probably, on average, about 1,000 of you will be listening to the stream. So yeah, welcome. And that's great that, so many hundreds of people are coming over every month. The purpose of this channel is primarily to prepare people, particularly in the US left, but, any other sort of English-speaking, particularly, more Western countries that have had the sort of problems that the US left has had. The purpose is trying to improve the left, trying to raise the bar and prepare more people who want to participate in left politics for some kind of real effective action, which, there's the classic formula: agitate, educate, and organize. We can do agitation, which is talking to people in the audience, wherever, and drawing out their complaints about the system, helping people to elaborate and, talk about what they don't like about their situation. Educate, which is, tying in people's concerns to, well, it's capitalism that's doing those things, and here's what we can do instead, and all that kind of educational work, showing people the history of actual real-world socialist struggle over centuries. And the third step, organizing, that is on you. You've got to go out into your community, find what organizations are active. If you're particularly dedicated and inspired, maybe starting a chapter of an organization that is not already existing in your community. This is really recommended if you have experience and a lot of contacts. But otherwise, joining something either locally at the state level, or if there's really nothing, or you're in a very rural area where there's not very much stuff or people or anything, maybe joining a national organization, engaging and participating. Christ, loud enough traffic. Engaging on that level until something builds up in your area. So yeah. Sorry, that noise completely distracted me. Actually, it reminds me, if the audiobooks slow down a little bit, it is summer now, it's July. The place where I record my audiobooks tends to get really hot, and there are fewer hours in the day when it is comfortable to record without an AC unit running. Now, I have, in the last 2 years that I've been doing this channel, I've been doing it since February 2020, I have just recorded the audiobook or whatever other video with the AC in the background. I'm trying this year to keep that to a minimum because it is sort of an annoying hum and kind of a distraction. So if it means that I record a little bit less, then I think so be it. That said, I'm still trying to record when it's feasible, not like, dripping with sweat and have to take a shower just because I recorded an audiobook. Etc. But the point being, there are a lot of new people who are, joining the channel, who are new to it. There are over 500 videos up on the channel now, including over 200 audiobooks. So this would be a great time to, yes, obviously keep looking for new content that's getting uploaded, but also get caught up on the old stuff. If you go to the home tab on the YouTube channel, I have a lot of nice playlists. You can look up playlists by author. You can look up some things by topic that I've put together, or you can look up or listen to things by reading list. In other words, there are some reading lists that different socialist parties have put out, things like that. The Marxist-Leninist Reading Hub, I did their 4-part playlist. Currently working on the American Party of Labor, which is a Hojist party. It's a bit niche, but they have a good reading list, actually. Of course, there's no Mao and there's a lot of Hoja. But some interesting stuff on that list, and I'm working on completing that. working on completing a couple of other things. There's I think I finished all of the Hakim, another large YouTube socialist channel, Hakim, as a reading list. I think I've done all of them except for Lenin's Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. The reason is that that is number 26 in the basic ML study guide playlist, which is put out by another group, Anti-Imperialist Movement. And I'm trying to do that one in order. It's really tempting to skip around, but I'm really trying to do it in order. The next thing, Anti-During Part 1 by Engels, is slated for this month. Probably like a 5-hour audiobook. And those are just tricky to record. I really like things I can get done in 1 or 2 sittings, but just not always the case. So expect that sometime this month. Otherwise, what I did upload so far this month have just been a few things. I got Stalin's Against the Vulgarization of Self-Criticism, which, boy, did that bring out the Trots and other anti-Stalinists. Lenin's Freedom to Criticize and Unity of Action, and Mao's on Correcting Mistaken Ideas in the Party. I'm also about halfway through, or not quite halfway through, recording Marx's 18th Brumaire. That'll be up either this weekend or next week. I thought I was going to get to it a little bit sooner, but it is just really long and sort of a multiple session type of thing. But some other short things definitely coming this weekend, and all like that. Okay, enough self-congratulations. Let's, I guess, get into some of the content here. So, BA5 recently became dominant. So there's a headline. I put this in the community tab as well. This is getting a lot of media attention. It's not translating into action almost whatsoever. I, have polls running about, are you in a socialist party or organization, and have you staged any protests, demanding better COVID protections? This needs to happen. I don't know what else to say. A lot of people are going to get really hurt by COVID, including younger people, and there's just almost dead silence from the public about it. We know that the anti-maskers and, COVID denialists are numerous, very motivated, and kind of psychotic. But, at this point, I don't care about them. They can, send all the comments that they like. They're digging their own grave. Next year, 2023, I think that the system is going to get so gummed up, so paralyzed. We've already seen stories about the looming food shortage. So the way that food shortages work is, if there is, some kind of harvest deficit, some deficiency in what is taken in, the effects aren't immediate. Why? Because there are grain storage facilities and other, food storage facilities. The thing about those is, unless they are constantly replenished, they do eventually run out. So what we're understanding about the food shortage situation, like Russia and Ukraine, for example, are some of the biggest wheat exporters. You can't just look at producers, you have to look at exporters, who actually grows it for export, for sale to other countries. They are some of the biggest wheat exporters in the world, and the harvests are dropping dramatically. This isn't going to cause an immediate shortage this year, but next year, after the storage, facilities, the surpluses have dwindled, that's when you're going to see it. So the same is true of long COVID. So 10 to 30%, depending on how you measure it, of people who get COVID get long COVID, including people who had asymptomatic or mild cases of COVID, get long COVID. Of those, again, depending on how you measure it, there were 2 studies. One said 59%, one was over 80% of people get some kind of neurological symptoms. And the majority of those people who have neurological symptoms are unable to return to work. I do have a short story about that. A lot of people have been asking for a COVID update, and I have a whole window of my browser that is full of like 30 tabs of COVID-related stories. It's honestly hard to keep up, but let me put it this way. I don't feel like the public as a whole, that may not be true of the S4A audience, but the public as a whole has not caught up with the research that we have already put into existing COVID updates on the channel. For example, we're going to come back to the story, but to show a quick visual, this is my go-to. This is from National Geographic UK. Even mild COVID-19 can cause your brain to shrink. Recent brain imaging shows that the disease can cause physical changes equivalent to a decade of aging, and it can trigger problems with attention and memory. Exactly why is still a mystery. So we do know that COVID causes inflammation throughout the brain. It attacks the brain stem. COVID can cause inflammation in a number of ways. It can cause inflammation as part of the healing process, as many infections can secondarily. Also, COVID directly itself mimics pro-inflammatory chemicals that your body uses in cases where your body needs inflammation. It can mimic those chemicals and initiate an inflammatory response on its own. We've covered this in a previous COVID thing. There are also other mechanisms by which COVID can cause inflammation. It causes inflammation throughout your body in major vital organs, including your brain. It causes dysregulation of major organ systems. Really nasty stuff. And it seems to have lasting effects on the brain. Brain damage, in other words. So COVID causes brain damage in many people who contract COVID. What is the fallout from that? It's significant enough that many people have trouble returning to normal daily activities, and even more have trouble returning to work. So, wasn't the BA5 screen. So anyway, we were here with the BA5 becoming dominant. So we've covered BA5 before. So the first Omicron was BA1. Then there were some BA1 subvariants. Then there was BA2, which was kind of a sibling, not a child, but a sibling of BA1. And we saw reinfections of people who had already had BA1 Omicron in December or January getting reinfected with BA2 in February or March. That's bad, because it used to be that with the original COVID, you could get infected and then, it would do whatever damage it was going to do. Maybe you would survive, maybe you wouldn't. Maybe you would have long COVID, maybe you didn't have any long COVID symptoms, whatever. But the immune response that the original COVID prompted in your body was sufficient that you had antibodies and you were basically protected for months and months. So that used to be the case. Now, the post-Omicron variants, BA1, 2, 3, I think is already extinct. BA4 and BA5 are driving the current surge. These are highly immune evasive. So whether you got vaccinated, which by the way is still a good idea if you haven't, or whether you have, quote, natural immunity or both, natural immunity from a previous infection, these things can largely dodge it. So this is where, I support the vaccines. It gave good protection. Yes, like any medicine, there were some adverse reactions to it. That's going to be the case with any medicine. But by and large, the risk of that was dwarfed absolutely by the much larger threat of the virus itself. Anyway, while that's a good thing, having a vaccine-only strategy was never adequate for controlling COVID, and it still isn't. And, this is the Biden administration's contribution, led by a guy named Jeff Zients. We did a video on this story from the American Prospect. Zients, Z-I-E-N-T-S. This guy is Biden's COVID czar. What's his experience? Is he an epidemiologist? Is he an MD? No, he used to work for Bain fucking Capital. The place that Mitt Romney was from, that Obama basically ran against in 2012. Well, that's who's in the White House with a Democrat running the COVID response. So Biden's whole thing this past winter about, many of you may die and stuff like that, that was written by Jeff Zients, Bain Capital. That's who's in charge of the pandemic response right now, and that's why it fucking sucks. That's why it's putting all of us in danger. So that's the situation currently. Where was I? Yeah. So the vaccines are good. Vaccine only was never a transmission control strategy. Yes, people who get vaccinated, if they get infected, their immune system is going to be on top of the virus more quickly, and you will have a high viral load for less time because your immune system is more primed to deal with it. That said, the viral load is comparable for the first 5 or 6 days, which is when people are most infectious anyway. So, yeah, I mean, there are other benefits like people who are vaccinated because you have a lower viral load, with time. People who aren't vaccinated, the virus persists in higher levels for longer. The unvaccinated people with that higher viral load are more likely to spawn mutations of the virus. Whereas vaccinated people, it's not reproducing in your body for as long of a time and in as great, the numbers aren't as great. So, these are benefits to vaccines, no doubt. But if you're not controlling transmission through mask mandates and shutdowns as needed, then you end up where we are right now. We've ended up with BA4 and BA5. BA5 has the Delta spike variant or the Delta spike mutation. So it is about as severe as Delta was, but several times more contagious. These are extraordinarily contagious. They're much more contagious than original COVID, even much more contagious than Delta. So this is a horrible situation. And, people might think, oh, well, I got a booster shot back in December. I personally got a booster shot back in December. Well, that's pretty much worn off by now. The coverage just doesn't last that long. And I can't get a second booster shot, So that's a problem. And, so I wear a mask and I try to avoid every situation that I can otherwise. A lot of people are not doing this. So BA5 is spreading like wildfire. This is, and this is just where it's at now. We're 2.5 years into the thing. It's showing absolutely no signs of stopping. BA5 is not the end of this. There's no reason to think that anyway, because, people were declaring Omicron like, oh, the pandemic is over. No, you just had the worst spike of the entire pandemic, and Omicron is highly mutated. It's almost a brand new virus. Why are you saying this is over? My video on that was the pandemic may just be beginning. Here we are 7 months later, or 6 months later past that. And that's exactly what's happening. We are currently in the third worst surge of the pandemic. I want to read this article. We'll come back to it. Let's do the biobot stuff. So this is was updated yesterday, July 6th. COVID-19 wastewater monitoring in the U.S. So the light blue shorter curve is the clinical. That's represented on the right side. You can see the scale goes from 0 to 1.5 million. That's the number of new cases in a day. And currently, what are we at? Like 150,000 new cases a day. I'm estimating off of that, just eyeballing it. But the darker line is wastewater. So they're not counting a lot of the cases. This was the thing, like if you're vaccinated, it doesn't necessarily get counted. That started last year. And then, a lot of people are using rapid tests and those don't get counted because you do them at home and, they don't get counted. So the cases, even with all of those political obstacles getting in the way, the cases are still, there's a clear surge. But you look at the wastewater because there's just, it's a more direct measure of what's actually going on. Wastewater is monitored for all types of stuff, chemicals, DNA, RNA. They look at what's in the water. And it's a really good way, the whole case count is several steps removed, but wastewater, very direct way of seeing what's going on. So if you go to biobot.io/data, which is where this graphic came from, those of you who've been watching for a while will be very familiar with this, and you hover over the right side of the dark blue curve, it will show you that the amount of COVID being detected in the water right now is higher than the Delta spike, which was fall of 2021. It's higher than the winter of 2020, 2021. It is currently a little bit lower than that initial spike back in April, May 2020, but it's about to surpass it. So right now, obviously, Omicron in January 2022 is the biggest spike by far. Second is the April 2020. And then in third place currently is the BA4, BA5 spike, which of course rode on the coattails of BA2 and related subvariants, subvariants. That's where we're at. And you can see that the line is pointing up sharply. It's been plateauing for a while, and it's starting to climb again. Let's take a look at the regional data, and we'll see why it's climbing again. So the yellow-orange line is the Northeast US. The pink line is the Southeast US. The green line is the Western US, and the purple line is the Midwest, the sort of, northern central US. All four of the lines except for the West are climbing currently. And there's something worth noting here. The Northeast was dipping, and then it bottomed out, and now it's climbing again. So what you're seeing there is the effect of the left side of the chart back in May. That was BA2 and related subvariants. That declined and got pushed out. Then it fell to a certain bottom point around 600. That's on the left-hand side, copies per milliliter of sewage. And then why is it climbing again? Well, that's BA5. And you see that in the Midwest as well. Hold on, siren. There we go. This happens while I record audiobooks as well. It's annoying as hell. So yeah, BA2 dies out, BA5 and BA4 come in, and that's why the line starts climbing again. And here's the thing about the COVID strains when they come in, like that is it just starting. So if we go back to the overall chart, look at where it says April 2022. So that's Omicron comes down. It doesn't hit zero, but it does bottom out. Then it starts climbing. That was the beginning of BA2. All right, that's what was driving that there. That's what's reflected in those data. So then it goes up and it plateaus for a long time. Then basically in the last week or two, the Northeast, why I mentioned that is because the Northeast was leading the charge. It was several weeks ahead of the other regions of the US in the BA2 surge. So, of course, it's also going to die out there, most likely the fastest, and that is what happened. Now, it's leading the charge again on BA4, BA5, although some of the other regions actually have higher proportions currently, so it may get outpaced by somewhere else. BA5, I think, is so contagious, it's going to be very unpredictable. But it's climbing again. So if you go back to that April 2022, you look at how high it climbed between Omicron, which is basically BA1, and then the BA2. So we're now at the point where we're switching from BA4 to BA5, or sorry, from BA2 to BA4 and 5, which are coming in conjunction with each other. So how high is it going to climb now? We don't know. We may not have the sharp Omicron style spike, but almost definitely this is going to, really just if it climbs even a little bit, it's going to be higher than that initial peak, making this officially the second highest peak. And they're declaring that the pandemic's over, or that if it's not over, we have to at least, quote, move on from it. No. You can't just move on from that's like saying, oh yeah, my house is on fire, but I'm going to move on. I'm just going to go about my life. No, so if you try to do that, what's going to happen? You're going to burn to death. Yeah, so that's what's going to happen here. If you try to move on during a pandemic, you just get repeatedly reinfected until decade after decade gets shaved off of your life from all the massive inflammation hitting your vital organs. That's what's going to happen. And in fact, COVID was the leading cause of death in 2021 for Americans aged 45 to 54, and the second leading cause of death for people aged 35 to 44. Too many refuse to vaccinate, too many refuse to mask, too many refuse to heed airborne precautions. We can put the US government in the refuse to heed airborne precautions category. They absolutely refuse to do that and to tell people to mask. Because the reality is you have to make people mask, or they're just not going to do it in sufficient numbers. And they knew, if I know that, they know that. So they didn't do it. People didn't mask, and we got massive, massive spread. Excuse me. So that's where we're at, and it's likely to just keep climbing. We have no reason again to think otherwise. So looking now at the this is a CDC graphic. Moving on from the BioBot, you can see the breakdown, and the dark green is the BA5. The lighter green is the BA4. So on the top left shows the United States from late March to early July. You can see that the BA2.12.1 is that red color. That came in, it pushed out BA2, and then it in turn, very shortly thereafter, gets pushed out by the emerging BA4 and BA5. So this is just what happens now. We can see it over and over again. And you can see it by region in the bottom half of the chart. So what's coming in after BA5? Don't know yet, although we did mention in the last video that there is the BE1 and the BF1 strains, two of them, which are emerging in Germany and Denmark. Those are very similar to BA5. I believe that they are spin-offs from BA5, but they're much more contagious. I believe that BE1 was in Germany spreading at 170% of the rate of BA5. BA5 is already insanely contagious. The fact that you have something that's going to add another 70%, speed of transmission, it's just blinding. I mean, we may well end up with another, Omicron type spike. I mean, the pandemic, like I said, may have just been beginning with Omicron, not ending. There's, again, just no data to suggest that nothing about knowledge of this disease, or really any, suggests that, a massive spike like that is going to be the end. And indeed, it hasn't been so far. Anyway, so the BA5 article, let's read through this. So the highly transmissible BA5 Omicron subvariant is now the dominant coronavirus strain in the U.S., accounting for nearly 54% of COVID-19 infections last week, according to estimates from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. As cases rise and drug companies work to reformulate vaccines to target new viral strains known for their ability to evade antibodies. Next page. BA5 and the closely related Omicron substrain BA4 comprised 70% of coronavirus infections for the week ending July 2. So if you add in BA4, that's now 70%, according to CDC estimates, which may be subject to changes. So the same thing is true of the wastewater data. I recently showed a BioBot wastewater chart, which showed that the plateau was starting to angle down. However, they added additional data as it came in late, and it kept on plateauing. So yeah, I mean, it's never really all set until 3 or 4 weeks after. But anyway, the BA2.12.1 variant, which helped to fuel a spike in COVID-19 cases when it was dominant in the spring, accounted for only 27% of cases last week. The news comes a week after the FDA recommended that pharmaceutical companies update their coronavirus vaccine booster shots by the fall to target BA4 and BA5 in anticipation of a winter COVID-19 surge. Commenting the downside is they will be extinct by then. Now, whatever variants we have likely will be children or at least close relatives of BA4 and BA5, but those will be gone by then. This, they're starting to think about updating, the Omicron booster shot now. Omicron's been extinct for months already. Is it closer to what's circulating now? Yeah, but this is the most half-assed vaccine effort in so many ways, whether it's, not lifting the IP protections so that the whole world can get vaccinated. Transmission is just going rampant. I mean, that's the bottom line here. And if you just let this thing rip, it's sort of like going back to 2020, but with a much more serious virus, both in terms of the virulence, its ability to cause disease, and its ability to be spread. It's like going back to 2020, but no mask mandates and no shutdown and a worse virus. And yes, there are the vaccines now, but these are highly vaccine evasive, and that wasn't the case before. But it becomes the case when you use the vaccine as something other than sort of a last resort, your final layer of protection. So shutdowns and other broad, mandates throughout society, including mask mandates and washing your hands, like these are the outer layers of protection that you need to actually control transmission. It actually has to be a group effort, coordinated, planned. And, when you get down to like the vaccine, at that point, when does the vaccine come into play? After you've gotten infected. So that's if everything else fails and you catch the virus anyway. Let's say that, you're doing some kind of work that you just absolutely can't, it can neither endure long shutdowns just because of the emergency nature of the work or whatever it is. You're somebody that has to be out there, and even despite, the better PPE that maybe you got, maybe you didn't, you still got infected. Well, that's where the vaccine comes in. But the way that the Biden administration did it was, hey, mask or vax. Are you vaccinated? Go about your life as normal. So I can tell you that from day one, that was doomed to fail. That was never going to work. Never. In order for something like that to work, you have to have such a higher proportion of the population vaccinated than there was. And even then, it's risky because the vaccine only limits the virus so much. So you still needed mask mandates at the very minimum, if not shutdowns. But anyway, that's where we're at. So I think that this summer is going to be a shit show, and it's just getting started. You know how many cases, like how much COVID spread this past weekend with the 4th of July? I mean, nobody that I saw anywhere was masking. And everybody was, congregating in big gatherings. So many cases are going to be reported this week and next. I don't even know. And this is really just the beginning of this warm weather season, and everyone is acting like the pandemic's over. And what is this going to look like in the winter? I was talking about the food shortages and stuff. That only hits next year, the following year. Takes some time for the damage to register. What is, the long COVID situation going to be like a year from now? Is anyone going to be able to work? Anyway, it's already hitting levels that are pretty staggering and are significantly impairing people's ability to just hold a job. I think it's going to be 10 times worse next year. So what this means, they're not taking very good care of their own system. And unfortunately, too few people are getting organized, and you have to get organized because, in times of crisis for capitalism, the capitalists naturally gravitate towards reaction. We see that like in France, for example, where Macron and the far right are allying against the left. This is the same in the United States. The Democrats and Republicans align against, Bernie Sanders and anyone to Bernie's left. This is what always happens. When push comes to shove, they rally to save capitalism. That's the bottom line for them. So in a situation like that, the left has a lot that it could be taking advantage of in terms of trying to get people organized. And I know that the population we're trying to work with in the US is like heavily propagandized and just socialized into a very individualistic, bourgeois type of, value set. But you got to do it anyway, because you're basically in a race against the fascists, who are pretend socialists, who take on the aesthetics and try to co-opt the energy of revolution while really just spinning it into support for the status quo. That's what's historically happened in Italy and Germany, on, and clearly happening in the United States now. And you get a lot of not very theoretically or historically literate people being like, well, Trump's kind of like the closest thing to a socialist the U.S. has had. I don't agree with it, but he this whole idea that he sort of bucks the system or whatever. it's not enough to just say that it's wrong. We have to organize around that people who have not been completely sucked into it, and can still be pulled out. It's got to happen. But, of course, we got CPUSA, for example, the premier Communist Party of the United States, the Communist Party of the United States. See the YouTube community tab, putting out messaging like, basically vote blue no matter who. So that's not going to work. We need effective socialist organizing, because we are in, as the system breaks down, as the system racks up all this damage, more and more people are going to become pissed off, and somebody's agitation is going to catch them. We need it to be ours, I guess is the point. So honestly, I am pretty freaked out because I don't think, I'm doing what I can. I'm running this channel. Other people are doing other education and organizing efforts. But to me, it's still not adding up to the kind of thing it needs to be. There are wins, there are successes. Yes, people are getting organized, but it needs to be happening by the millions and tens of millions. So far, it isn't. Got to keep at it, keep doing what we're doing, or improve on it. But it's concerning. Anyway, continuing the article. It also comes as COVID-19 cases have been on the rise in recent months, with the United States averaging 94,345 new infections per day in the week ending July 4, more than triple the 30,558 daily cases reported as of April 10, but well below the January peak. Yeah, well, everything's below the January peak. That's not really a good metric compared to the rest of the pandemic. And as I said, we're now in the third largest surge, Omicron, April 2020, and this. And it's about to surpass the April. So we will be in the second biggest peak in like a week or two tops. Anyway, where were we? Hospitalizations have trended upwards too. COVID-19 hospital admissions averaged 4,376 per day in the 7-day period ending July 3, more than twice the average of 1,428 per day in early April, though numbers are still much lower than Omicron. Yeah, well, everything is lower than Omicron right now. They're not going to be able to hang on to that for long, because soon it will be closer to Omicron. Anyway, key background. BA4 and BA5 were first discovered earlier this year in South Africa, where the strains became dominant, and they eventually made their way into the US in late March, though Omicron substrain BA2 remained the dominant variant for several weeks. All three of the substrains have specific mutations in their spike proteins, the part of the virus that binds to the human cell, that help them to evade the immune system, with data suggesting that BA5 is even better at escaping antibodies from previous coronavirus infections and vaccines. Countries around the world, like the UK, are also seeing a spike in cases as BA4 and BA5 become their most prevalent coronavirus strains. BA4 and BA5 combined became the dominant COVID-19 substrains in the US 2 weeks ago, accounting for 55% of cases. I can't fucking believe, I want to scream, because it's just getting worse. More people are getting hurt and injured, and it's just going to keep going, and there's literally no plan to do anything else. And there's barely even outcry for it. So, yeah, why are not more orgs and parties doing something about this? Get on it. This is just irresponsible at this point, not to. What to watch for? A continued spike in COVID-19 cases over the summer, the rise in new subvariants that are even more contagious than previous strains and capable of escaping the immune system suggest, quote, substantial circulation of virus this summer. Dan Baruch, director of the Center for Virology and Vaccine Research at Boston's Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, told the Wall Street Journal next week. Yeah, this isn't like rocket science. Substantial circulation of virus this summer is exactly what you'd expect. It's really not that complicated. So let's look at a little graphic. This shows the increased frequency with which new strains have been replacing old strains. This is from Diego Bassani, PhD, on Twitter. Nicer plots of the terrible situation we've put ourselves into. Well, again, I'm not in charge of public policy, so I haven't put myself in the situation. capitalists, people who actually have power, put us in this situation. I can't stand that kind of thinking. But anyway, first, a bird's eye view of how the frequency of substitution is increasing in Canada. Of course, it's similar in other countries. Maybe delayed a few weeks or, have this or that slight change in conditions, but it's generally a similar pattern. This is empirical data. Data is plural. These are empirical data showing variant substitution. It was a drawing back in April, see quoted tweet. So you can see the increased frequency with which the new strains are outcompeting the old strains. We had a similar visual, I think I want to say it was like Mississippi or something. Somebody was doing wastewater monitoring, and it was like a circus of different Omicron substrains competing with each other, but very similar. So that's increasing. This is not the pandemic is over. This is things are getting crazier and crazier. All right. So that's about what I want to say about COVID. Again, I don't feel a super strong need. I will be sorting through articles, particularly to talk more about the impact of COVID on the immune system. It seems to wipe out your T cells. This is not identical to HIV, but some of the things are fairly similar. So not a good situation. I want to do more on the immune system and COVID. That's going to take some time for me to put that together. Otherwise, just go back and go over the other stuff, because I feel like, again, people have just not assimilated the information we have about the damage that COVID does, even if you survive the acute phase. And, if I'm ranting about this, this is the house is on fire level situation, in my view. And we're going to be feeling the effects in a huge way later this year, and especially, I think, next year. So I don't know what the people running the system are thinking, and I know even less what socialist organizations not organizing around this are thinking. So anyway, let's move on, though, just briefly to monkeypox. Speaking of disease outbreak, so here we've got in the vernacular, I had some pedant trying to weigh in. It's not actually exponential growth unless the variable is in the exponent. Fuck you. Okay, so quadratic growth, like, please. As people normally say, exponential growth in that the rate of growth increases with time. It's not linear or static increases. My God. In a pandemic, you think that's the most helpful contribution you can make is like, it's not exponential. Anyway. People are strange. What can I say? But anyway, here's the monkeypox chart. These are the confirmed cases. All right. Testing remains scarce. So I'd say roughly triple or quadruple this on the safe side. And, up and up and up it goes. Where it stops, nobody knows, but we have no real reason to think it's going to stop. It's summer. People sweat. People are dripping with fluids. People are not wearing clothes as much because it's hot out, so there's more odds of bumping into somebody's skin, etc. In other words, your skin is not as covered up. People are outdoors more, packed into crowds. Is monkeypox more or less likely to spread in that type of environment? There's certainly, an increased number of opportunities for skin-to-skin transmission, even accidentally. But monkeypox is also airborne. So let's look at something about that really quick. If I have it, I do. So this is, unfortunately, the CDC is continuing their really under management of not just COVID, but they're now extending it to monkeypox. Rochelle Walensky started out a COVID warrior, got into office, and someone gave her a talking to. This is just how capitalism works. Capitalism constrains science because the profit motive/mandate comes before everything else. So the visual on the left, what clinicians need to know about monkeypox in the US and other countries, dated May 24, 2022. This is from a presentation that the CDC gave to practitioners. It says transmission, direct or indirect contact with bodily fluids or lesion materials, contact with fomites, exposure to respiratory secretions, and then examples of high and intermediate risk exposures highlighted: being inside the patient's room or within 6 feet of a patient during any procedures that may create aerosols from oral secretions, skin lesions, or resuspension of dried exudates without wearing an N95 or equivalent respirator or higher. So what's higher than an N95, by the way? Elastomeric. That's the gas mask looking types. Those are the gold standard for airborne disease and eye protection. By the way, if you're interested in an elastomeric, a lot of them can be had for like 30 or 40 bucks. The filters don't need to be changed very often. Some of them have goggles if you want eye protection. It's worth it. I follow on Twitter Laura Myers, Myers. She has some info about elastomerics. If you've taken this seriously, it may be worth it. And then on the right side, there is CDC messaging CDC messaging to the public about monkeypox. It's not known to linger in air, not transmitted during short periods of shared airspace. It spreads via contact. It also may spread when people have close face-to-face contact, so presumably spittle or other moist particles before the water vapor in your breath gets like spread out in the air. So that directly contradicts the other thing about being within 6 feet of a patient, aerosols from oral secretions, etc., without wearing an N95, etc. So it's not known to linger in air. This is one piece of evidence here. There are other pieces of evidence for monkeypox being airborne. Yet another reason to wear an N95. So anyway, this is how it's going. Just a very brief overview of what's going on. I think we have this too. This is what I was talking about before, the reinfection. One COVID expert's reinfection shows why. I'm not sure which expert they're talking about here. I know that one of the people who was working on a low-cost vaccine that they were intending to share with India, I can see the guy, and I'm blanking on his name right now, Dr. Peter Hotez in Texas. He got reinfected like a month after Omicron. So again, it's just they're immune evasive. They don't rouse the same level of immune response. And then they have mutations on the outside of the virus that can help to evade your body's attempt to capture the virus. So anyway, these days, even vaccinated and boosted people who were infected as recently as January's Omicron surge are finding themselves catching COVID a second or even a third time. Some of this is due to the evolving nature of the virus, and some is the result of less vigilant behavior, said Dr. Bob Wachter, the chair of medicine at UCSF. Many people may assume that they can't get reinfected so soon, when that's likely not the case. And like I said before, this is not original COVID anymore. It's not you get it and you're protected for 8 or 9 months. This is basically you get it, you're protected for a month tops, but assume that you're not protected at all. And they need to update the vaccines as well. But again, even if they have a great vaccine, if they had an excellent vaccine, which so far the vaccines are good, they give protection, but it does not just wipe the thing out. We would need a significantly better vaccine for a vaccine-only strategy to work, okay? Significantly better. And you would need like the entire population to get it, basically. Otherwise, you have a large contingent of the population. And again, this is global, this is worldwide spread, so you need to get it to people the whole world over. If you don't get basically everybody vaccinated, like 90%, et cetera, then the remaining people, it's enough of a pool for it to keep spreading and mutating. And then the mutated version can come back and get even the vaccinated people if it evolves to evade that immunity. So anyway, this is where we're at. Without mask mandates and shutdowns and other, society level protections, we're fucked. And there's really no other way to say it. We have to organize around these issues because we are staring a really, really dangerous situation in the face, and it's time to just... Obviously, Biden and the Democrats are not going to do jack shit about it. If you want something else to be done on this, we have to do it ourselves. This is something people really have to get through their heads, is socialist history is not written by the bourgeoisie. The capitalists are not going to launch some new party for you to get involved with. Like, it doesn't just, drop like a new video game or like a new, like, single from like a musician or something. You can't just go buy it. You have to build it yourself. This is history that we write. And if you're not sitting down there with pen in hand, nothing gets written. And I'm begging people do something because it's BA5 today. It's probably BE1 or BF1 tomorrow. What's it going to be 6 months from now? So, yeah. I mean, literally, last year, Biden was declaring mission accomplished. And here we are after Delta and Omicron and BA4, BA5. That's where we are. Like what's it going to be 6 months from now? Anyway, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Yeah, I mean, I don't understand how people are just going on about their business with this stuff. I really, really don't. But in any case, I've gone on for quite a while. Let's check in with the chat and probably just finish it out with talking to the chat. So, no idea what's going on with the chat, but there are 45 viewers, which is neat. That's more than we usually have. So, let's just see what's going on. So, Chills is saying the party is seeing a boom in followers and people coming up to me asking about socialism. More and more people are open now than more than ever to hearing about the great accomplishments of Cuba and the Soviet Union. What party are you talking about? I'm missing the beginning part of this. I mean, it's good news anyway. So. Not just online, sorry, not just online, but in person. If I wasn't drained from selling plasma right now, I'd be out at the local protest today, getting more signatures and making more contacts. We have to build communities. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it takes social skills, and I think that this is part of the problem. There was a tweet going around. Uh, I mean, it's kind of a standard sort of joke format, but it's you're not a Bolshevik or a Red Guard. You're 22 years old and you're scared to death of talking to your neighbors about forming a tenant union. Now, I mean, there's nothing to say that a 22-year-old can't become, a dedicated socialist, but these are not simple declarations you make about yourself. It's not as simple as just, wearing like a hammer and sickle button on your like bag or something. You have to actually do the work or else you're just posing, and that's not okay. Don't know what else to tell you. And we're doing cooperative efforts with other orgs like Planned Parenthood, and they're not even afraid of sharing the PSL logo on social media. Okay, talking about PSL. We can win this, but we need more people. Collaborating with Planned Parenthood. It's good. I mean, the Democrats sure as fuck aren't going to do anything real, and I think more people are realizing that. Again, can we, agitate to pick people up? Hang on one second. Okay. I mean, for real, people are coming up to me asking about Marxism while at protests. You know how great that feels. That is good. It is really good. I mean, may it continue. I don't know what else to say. What we're trying to do at the channel here is make the base level education as accessible as possible. Again, trying to raise the bar on the US left, trying to get more people who are trying to participate in left politics on a firmer footing, more solid foundation, etc. That's the effort here. That more people join a party or start thinking about politics, having at least heard State and Revolution or something, That's what we're trying to do because 10 years ago, it really just wasn't the case at all. And of course, this is not the only channel doing such things, but we're trying to do it, and I'm at it pretty hard. So, on COVID, half my family is not as cautious anymore. They don't really wear masks anymore. They all caught it this past week. Yeah. One member of my family might be a long hauler and wants to go out and be around us, which freaks me out. Yeah, I mean, if you're a long hauler, you don't want to get reinfected. That's all I can really say. Probably most of one of the most likely hypotheses of what's going on with long haul COVID people or long COVID people is persistent infection. They're no longer contagious, but they're carrying it in their body. So I guess the good news is they're no longer contagious, but you don't want to get reinfected, and then you have multiple strains, and then maybe you get a recombinant strain going in your body as the different strains literally exchange genetic material in your body. A lot of potential downsides there. A lot of things that can go wrong. Uh, does it say what percentage of people with long COVID symptoms are vaccinated? So I have to make a point of getting more focused studies on that. Things that we know is that over a certain point, writing that down, long COVID, vax relationship. We know that if you get hospitalized with COVID, you're like twice as likely or more to get long COVID. Below that, mild versus moderate symptoms are about equally likely as far as I know. So I don't know of studies specifically talking about vaccines and long COVID in terms, excuse me, in terms of if you are vaccinated, are you less likely to get the long COVID symptoms? I do know that if you have like mild or asymptomatic COVID, the last thing I looked at said that you're just as likely to get long COVID as anybody else who wasn't hospitalized. So I would think that it doesn't necessarily make a difference, but we'll see. One factor to consider, apart from variants like BA.5, is that I heard that vaccines are no longer free. So I'll come back to that. And that they don't even test or check vaccination records. I don't know about the second part, but yes, that's a good point to bring up. So the US, a couple of months ago, I want to say like early April, late May, the US Congress refused to pass funding for monoclonal antibodies. So they got some funding for monoclonal antibodies, which is one of the treatments if you do get hospitalized. Basically, they just infuse you with somebody else's antibodies, roughly. I mean, they clone the antibodies and then that your body would be making to like wrangle the virus and neutralize it. But if your body's not making them fast enough, they can just sort of infuse them into you. The Congress refused to pass the full funding for that, so the White House was not able to get as many doses of the monoclonal antibody treatment as they had requested. And at that same time, I believe it was like the same vote, they also made it used to be that if you were uninsured, you could get the vaccine for free. And that's, I believe, no longer the case. So I don't know how much it is. I don't know. That's a good point. I'll write it down. Uninsured vaccine. I'm not sure what's going on with that right now. But I mean, a lot of people, like if you got your booster back in the winter, you're probably, unless you're old or immunocompromised, not able to get a second one anyway. So, I mean, it's the wheels are coming off. So, yeah. Somebody says I'm vaxxed and boosted. Fortunately, that is good, and it's been probably decent protection up till now. The problem is for all of us, because they're not stopping transmission. The spread is just out of control, and the vaccines, even under the best of circumstances, are temporary protection. You know, it fades, it wears off, and that's something that's been known for a while. The vaccine coverage fades, um, then we're just sort of like back to square one eventually, and we're getting close to that. Oh God, there's somebody like trying to make an argument that like the vaccine is what got people sick. I'm sorry, but no, and go away. So yeah, vaccine and isolation is the only thing that has helped so far. Compare China versus basically the rest of the world. Yeah, yeah. Somebody's like, oh, is China faking their results? This is just desperation at this point. They were able to, because they actually controlled their borders so strictly, they were able to have a situation where people in 2020 didn't need masks and there weren't outbreaks. That's called actually controlling the transmission and monitoring the transmission. And that's called protecting people to safely go about their regular lives when it is safe to do so. In other words, creating a safe environment for people to go about their regular lives. In the US, everybody's just demanding to go about their regular life when it isn't safe. That's not okay. That's living in denial, and it makes you crazy over time. That's bad for your mental health to do those kinds of mental gymnastics and, well, double think. It's like knowing one thing but believing the opposite, holding two contradictory thoughts in your head. Um, that's what the US is doing, and it's driving everyone. It's really warping people's minds. So, one of the few good things we can take from Orwell. But I mean, it is. It's just this contradictory thinking where you just embrace two mutually exclusive concepts. That's like the US, and it's really twisting people. The people who survive a bout of COVID will have to live with all the disastrous after effects. You'll have a population of people living with lung issues and cognitive decline. Yes. Also, there's no such thing as collective immunity. The new variants dodge any natural immunity you get from it. That is correct. Let's see. Yeah, and I agree. These types of opinions, that the vaccine person was talking about, would be ignorant, but fine if the pandemic was just beginning. But in 2020, I mean, yeah, it is getting just laughable. Like, I mean, it's hurting people, so it's laughable to a limited extent. But I don't know. And yes, natural immunity is an anti-vax talking point. It's true to a certain extent, but you pay for it with a huge cost. I mean, if you get COVID, it takes a huge toll on your body. Yes, you will come out of it with antibodies, and even, your antibody profile will be more robust than just with the vaccine. However, you have gotten COVID at that point. It caused massive inflammation in your body, possibly caused long COVID. So that's the price. And again, even that quote natural immunity is also going to fade with time. None of this is permanent. So yeah. Yeah. How is natural immunity supposed to be a viable strategy when people can get reinfected and the reinfections are worse? Yes. So anyway, they don't care, they're a troll. So uh S4A, how yeah, before we get to that, you can't make a virus do what you want. That is correct. That is correct. It is a mindless natural phenomenon. It can't be reasoned with, it can't be negotiated with. You can just stop transmission and that's it. S4A, how would you go about organizing a COVID protest or some kind of mutual aid group to actively fight COVID on the ground level? So, same way you would organize a protest for anything else, someone in your organization or party should know how to do this. You plan it out at a meeting, you make signs, you issue a press release to as many, organizations as you can think of. You show up, you hold the thing, you give some speeches, you sing some songs, You pick a good location, everything else. Maybe some type of professional media outlet covers you, but assume that they won't, even though you sent out a press release. And then, plan accordingly. Take some video and pictures and promote it on your social media and get, followers and friends of the party or organization social media to boost it. And that's what you do. I'm sure I'm leaving out some steps, but that's the rough outline. I feel like this COVID shit is never going to end. Only China is trying hard and it won't help. COVID will take over the world. Just let it be, I guess. The only way to go, give up. No. So you had me there. At the end, it was all wrong. Just let it be, I guess. You're talking about laying down and dying, quite literally. Why is that your conclusion? Why is that your conclusion? Yeah, people with bad genes will just die. Lamau, literal Nazi shit. It really is. I mean, yeah, that's just not acceptable. I'm not willing to die because some capitalist decided that their quarterly fucking like some large company that their quarterly profits are more important than my life. No, fuck you. No. Yeah, bad genes will die off is full on fascist. I guess there was some troll in here. But again, people don't feed the fucking troll. Do I really have to say this every time? Every time? I figure in my head I don't have to say it every time, but don't feed the troll. And then now I have to try to keep up with the chat, but I have to scroll through all this shit. Why do I have to say this every time? We're on live stream number 27. All right. Uh, Yeah. The eugenics argument is beyond dumb, even by its own logic. What's the eugenics benefit to giving everyone weak immune systems and cognitive decline? So, but the people who are promoting that, and first of all, I agree with that. Um, the people promoting that line, just like let the weak die off or whatever, are anti science and they do not understand what this disease is doing. So, you're right. It actually creates more weak and disabled people, not fewer. They want some like pure genes scenario where like everybody who doesn't make the cut just gets wiped out by the hand of nature. Fascist shit. But that's not what COVID does. That's imaginary stuff that is anti-science and just came out of some Nazis like daydream. What actually happens is you either die or you get hurt to a point where you're much weaker than you were before getting infected. So yeah. When do we think that COVID and/or monkeypox is going to irrevocably shut down supply lines in the U.S.? I just don't see how this can go on. So, applause. These are my sentiments exactly, and I don't know why, for the love of all that is holy, more socialists are not asking this question and making strategies around it. For fuck's sake, pick it up, because that is what we are looking at. And let me just read it again. When do we think that COVID/monkeypox is going to irrevocably shut down supply lines in the US? I just don't see how this can go on. That last sentence, I just don't see how this can go on. That is what I've been saying this whole fucking time. So I agree wholeheartedly. I don't know. I'm one person reading audiobooks on a channel. I'm not seeing the, you know, this needs to happen in real life. I don't know. I mean, I hope that it's not a year from now and I'm still just some random, leftist like with a YouTube channel calling for action that just isn't happening. I don't know, but I wholeheartedly agree. I don't see how this can go on. It's already having an impact. I was just looking at an article in the UK because in the UK, for all their deficits of Britishness, um, it's of course tongue in cheek, sort of, they do take long COVID much more seriously. So it's more of like a thing on people's lips than it is in the US. So There are a lot of people in the medical system missing work. I mean, this is another thing that's just been swept under the rug is healthcare workers, frontline healthcare workers, people in the medical system, the trauma that has been endured in the last few years and ongoing things witnessed by healthcare workers. They're like some of the most traumatized people walking around society right now. Again, I don't see how this can go on either. And I think it's going to be, I think a year from now is going to be an unrecognizable, tangled mess. The wheels are coming off now. The full crash hasn't happened yet. But I think that the rest of the summer is going to be a complete shit show. And then by the time that the winter comes in and everybody's breathing stale, recirculated indoor air without wearing masks, et cetera, especially now that the CDC has dramatically lowered their risk warnings. I mean, that's another thing. Story I was just looking at. New York City is experiencing, and this was a week or two ago, experiencing, the beginnings of the BA5 surge. Huge, like, increase in hospitalizations, etc. The city dismantled their COVID-19 alert system. So this is what you can expect from the system. They want you to just die quietly, basically. But this is not a problem that can be swept under the rug. This isn't some massacre that some paramilitary group is committing. This is a virus. It's going to keep going on and on. You don't control the fucking tap on this thing. So trying to sweep COVID under the rug is not a winning strategy for the system. And I do think this could definitely be the beginning of a dramatic, painful, sort of worst case scenario ending. But just very protracted. And you can speed this up and give it a more positive outcome by organizing for, like along traditional Marxist Leninist lines. You can speed up a better outcome where we don't watch just like the wreck happens and just everyone inside burns alive in slow motion. You can avoid some of this. You can avoid worst case scenario by organizing along lines that work for ending capitalism. So anyway, it just needs to keep happening. Somebody talking about school. I'm literally scared to go back in the fall. No one will be wearing masks in class, and the cases will be out of control. Our university luckily has free PCR testing. Well, they have it for now, but hopefully they still have it. But what's the point of testing if all your testing is showing is that everybody has fucking COVID? Like, great, everybody's dying and they know it. That's not enough. The test positivity for the United States, as of a couple days ago, was 16.5%. The WHO recommendations from the early pandemic was if it's over 5%, you need a shutdown. And then it needs to stay under 5% for 2 weeks straight before you can reopen. So that went out the window. What I would really like to see is where were the decisions made to just completely disregard this? Because it was done virtually in unison across the EU, USA, like that orbit. All of the countries shut down at the same time, and they all basically abandoned the shutdown at the same time. There was a great degree of uniformity in that. Why? Who made these decisions? What exactly? How did that happen exactly? There are contradictions within the ruling class, and of course, between the ruling classes of different imperialist countries, etc. But that was I thought, strikingly uniform. So I would love to see actually what happened there. That was, I think, decisions made at a very high level that everyone else just sort of followed. But I'm very curious what happened there. But yeah, I mean, as far as a university, I have no idea. I have no idea. I was going to be taking a program, and I deferred because of Omicron, and not that. Anyway, I feel you. That's about the most I can say there. I mean, and it's obviously not just college either. Like grade school, high school. This is a huge problem. I was just looking at another article about wastewater monitoring. Kind of looks like the schools from the wastewater data have been major hubs of COVID spread for their surrounding community. So nothing about this makes sense. If you don't manage transmission rates with better air circulation and filters, lessening social gatherings indoors and out, wearing good masks, and generally cutting off its supply of fresh hosts, you don't beat the fucker, you just keep giving it fresh fuel to rage and literally decimate people's quality of life, all people, not just immunocompromised. And yes, the CDC is a nightmare organization. Um, if it followed its mandate of, preventing and controlling disease, they're not doing that in this case. They're not doing nearly enough. The vax only strategy, again, vaccines helpful, not a suitable basis for the entire transmission control. System just literally wants to have everyone work, and they don't care what happens to us. If we could only have a government that actually gave a shit about us instead of forcing us to work at any cost and compete and consume. So yeah, the only way that we're going to get that government is by building it. That's it. That's really it. This system is never going to produce that ever. This is, again, history we write if we write it. My union is trying to get the university to allow us a chance to teach from home. I mean, but see, whatever it is, and I think it's just sheer desperation, the 2022 mantra has been the pandemic is over. Fauci himself, this was, I mean, how there is not more of a revolt in the medical world. I mean, it's just, I think it's a lot of career as people tend to be paid very well in that field. But why there isn't more of a revolt is kind of astounding. Capitalism's ability to just, constrain people's, cause self-censorship. Fauci, head of, infectious disease control, gets up and says, we're out of the pandemic phase. No, we're not. If I know that, he knows that. He's lying. You got high-level officials lying to the public, saying that the pandemic's over. No, it's fucking not over. But so that's the thing. If they start closing the schools again and, you know, having people do school from home and work from home, then people start asking uncomfortable questions like, hey, were you fucking lying to us this whole time? And my 3 or 4 relatives who died from COVID, did they die for no reason because you fucking lied to us? So let's face it, the system has painted itself into a corner now where COVID is going to get worse. But if they start addressing it now, then they have to admit culpability for what they have failed to do in the last year since mask or vax. And, my money, knowing the US government, is on letting more people die than admitting fault. So that's the thing. I think that there's going to be pretty much ironclad resistance to rolling, any of this everything goes policy world that we've been living in. I think that they will fight tooth and nail against any recognition that the pandemic is like we're entering the second worst surge to date. That's if they acknowledge that now, they have to acknowledge their entire policy of the last year has been a miserable homicidal failure. So I don't think they're going to do that. But again, agitating around that, that is a thing we can do. Let's see. The troll has really sucked the air out of the chat, I must say. Again, just I know some of you are like regulars here. Don't feed the goddamn troll. I mean, they're out now. They've been out for like the last 20 minutes, but I was not looking at the chat. I was doing the stream. There's a few comments. I don't know that you can attribute vaccines to their success. I think talking about China. I'm not sure though who you're talking about. Um, they did lockdowns and they have housing there that allowed people to stay away from possible outbreak. Oh yeah, in China. Okay. No, I mean in China there is vaccination, higher rate of vaccination than in the US, but I mean that's part of it. But again, the vaccine is after everything else has failed. It's after you've already gotten infected. The bulk of your pandemic control strategy needs to be on people not getting infected, right? That's the point. You have to prevent infection in the first place. You have to prevent spread, prevent transmission. Because every time it spreads, every time that virus gets into a new host, it makes many more copies of itself, some of which mutate. And every once in a while, that mutation confers an advantage to the virus. So that's the bulk of the pandemic response is actual public health stuff. The United States has taken basically all of its public health strategy, rolled it up, crumpled into a ball, and threw it out the window. That's where we're at. We're living in Biden's, after 9/11, George W. Bush said, he encouraged everybody to go, the United States was in the grip of a manufactured hysteria about terrorist attacks. The reality was you were more likely to get struck by lightning than to, be the victim of a terrorist attack. But anyway, people were freaked out. And Bush got on TV and was like, everybody has to go about their life. You have to go shopping, otherwise the terrorists win. It's like you have to go to the mall or the terrorists win. And then that became kind of the refrain, like you can't let the terrorists win. I feel like people are still in that headspace. Um, we can't let the virus win. I have to go about my life completely as normal. Like it's just being willing to die and get other people killed and injured for this like US way of life of consumption and self-centered, bullheaded self-centeredness. I had another point, but I took a turn in the middle of it. And you know what? I'm remorseless. Alex Jones et al. Need to be banned from the airwaves forever. Well, I think people are working on that. And the thing is, Alex Jones, like, he started around like 1990. Um, there was a time where he wasn't as quite as batshit as he became in the like 2010s and stuff. And I'd say not quite as batshit. I mean, he was always in that sort of like right wing, like super patriot movement and everything. Um, but all the seeds that Alex Jones planted over the years, and it's not just him. He was kind of the most mainstream face of it, but the network that Alex Jones was on was like a shortwave network. It carried a dozen other people with similar shows, and if you listen to one, you're likely to listen to many of them. Um, that grew into it fed off of previous things like the John Birch Society and all the other kind of fascist, proto-fascist stuff, sovereign citizen movement, you know, um, and that stuff was there. It got fed and watered, and then the Tea Party, that was sort of a new phase of it going mainstream. Now with MAGA, it's just it is mainstream, it's self-sustaining, and whether or not Trump is the nominee, it's going to be somebody MAGA because that's who squarely, like, that's where all the energy is in that party. And the money behind the party doesn't really mind because those people are all stooges for capitalism. So, yeah, the ruling class will have disagreements about how best to manage capitalism. They all agree they need capitalism. And bottom line, as long as whatever whatever the ruling faction, whatever their particular flavor is, as long as they're in for capitalism, ultimately they're going to be supported, by other people in the ruling class. So as far as like stopping Alex Jones now, I mean, this is so much beyond Alex Jones at this point. I guess that's my like Alex Jones did his damage over like 30 years. And, it's like even Trump. I mean, MAGA is so much bigger than Trump at this point because even it's like Trump just took the Tea Party and then he did the whole birther thing with the Obama birth certificate, if you remember that. And he just told the Tea Party like, "I'll be your guy. I'll go for all this crazy fringe right wing stuff. I'll do it. Like I will be your leader, and we will ride this movement into power." And so they did. But even post Trump, they can cough up some other fucking person. I mean, Trump had a lot of things. He was definitely the person for that moment. He was like he had this star power. He was this sort of weird, rich, eccentric, with high public recognizability. He also, he's definitely a showman and knew how to work a crowd, knew how to be funny if in like a kind of sick way. But yeah, I mean, he was perfect for launching the thing. I don't even know that they need another Trump because anyway, I am pulling articles for more of this. Summer's just kind of a busy time all around, so these live streams seem a little thin on the prep end. That's why. But yeah. Anyway, just a few thoughts on that comment there. There were a bunch of shootings over the 4th of July weekend. Rich white kid shooter in Chicago. And no, I haven't covered it. Another day, another shooting in the U.S. What else can you say at this point? It's a fascist war zone. I don't mean to like be flippant or dismissive, but it is literally like these are not rare events anymore, like very commonplace. That's not to say that they're good or normal. I'm wondering just as much as anybody when it's like there's going to be some organized effort against this because Americans are big on talk, very little on organizing. And yeah, prove me wrong, folks. Prove me wrong. Question: how do you talk with Democrat family members about Marxism Leninism? I tried the other day and they threw Pol Pot at me in North Korea. Probably you don't. So I was thinking about this the other day. Hold on, I gotta take it. I was thinking about I guess it was the winter of 2020 to 2021. We're talking about the viability of, well, converting libertarians or whatever. Generally, I think it's better to go after apolitical people who are not really wedded to any status quo ideology. Any status quo meaning bourgeois capitalist ideology. Because you don't have to undo as much. It's probably easier to sort of get to them with some. There's going to be less cognitive dissonance, and they're going to be less likely to cling on to something that you have to like pry their fingers off of. So, I mean, in Democrats, it really depends on what kind of Democrat you're talking about. If you're talking about like K-Hive, McResistance people, I mean, almost don't waste your time. There's probably somebody better you can talk to. But I don't know, just point out the consistent failures of the Democratic Party. I would not jump to Marxism Leninism right away, obviously, especially if you have older family members who grew up during like Cold War shit. I mean, Democrats are anti-communist by and large. Um, you want to go after progressives, people who haven't really been part of the Democratic Party, or maybe they just joined because of Bernie and the hope of having some kind of a left moment. But mainstream Democrat ideology is bourgeois through and through. It's at best, social imperialist, very opportunist at best. So yeah, I don't know if these are like prime tier one candidates for discussing Marxism Leninism. So I again these are individuals, and ultimately every individual has sort of is an individual. Like every person you talk to, they have their own set of characteristics, they have their own set of experiences and their own concept that they're walking around with. So the key to their door, every key is a custom job. There are obviously going to be certain base models. You don't have to reinvent the whole thing from scratch with every individual that you start talking to. But there are certain kind of stock approaches that you can start with for different people, or different things that they will say that you can have sort of stock answers to that you can sort of customize as needed for that individual. But yeah, I mean, I think that the same way, if you're talking like a diehard ANCAP, it's going to be a difficult and painful discussion that, in my experience, and I am experienced at this, literally, I would say 99 times out of 100, those conversations go nowhere. Literally, it's 1 in 100. I would roughly estimate 1 in 100 as a serious, if I could actually, have a time machine and take stock of every single instant. I think it's been about 1 in 100 that, very committed people have, changed their mind or displayed any real willingness. Anyway, yeah, imagine if weekly shootings happen in what the U.S. deems, quote, enemy countries. Imagine if Waco or something like that happened in the Soviet Union. But no, the U.S. is, above all rules. It's above all comparisons. I mean, it's like people in the United States talking about human rights in literally any other country. That's not to say that other countries don't have human rights issues, but the U.S. is not the one to talk about them, period. I was unsure whether the China COVID numbers were real. The state could have done the measures needed to keep the numbers low. You mean like altered the measurement? I mean, they did do measures needed to keep the numbers low, but genuinely low. Well, they could have fabricated the numbers. Yeah, that's what the U.S. is doing by not counting many of the cases. But once I saw some Forbes article where Chinese billionaires complained that production was being cut, I knew it was real. People often can be very selective about where they choose to apply critical thinking. And yeah, I understand that the commenter was ultimately sort of being ironic, but just stating as a general thing, people can often be very selective about how they choose to apply critical thinking. One thing Chomsky is unequivocally right about is the US media. Yeah, so another comment. All of the prepper channels, these are the doomsday prepper libertarian survivalists, want everything to fall apart. Yeah, what's the thing? I haven't Teotwaki, the end of the world as we know it. They use that one a lot. They want everything to fall apart, and they truly think it's all a fucking game. Well, hell yeah. They spent $30,000 on their emergency bunker and all that canned food. They want to fucking use it, man. They didn't buy that just for fun. Oh, wait, did we lose the whole world in the process? Oops. Yeah. Those people are idiots. I don't know what else to say. They are, I made the comment before about people watching The Walking Dead as like inspirational. I think that the United States, in many ways, does have like a gigantic death wish like that. Um, it's a kind of nihilism that's very, very unconstructive, very destructive. I was saying before, we don't have to have worst case scenario where, the car crashes or the bus crashes and everyone inside burns alive as slowly as possible. It does not have to be like that. Like the end of US capitalism is gonna be ugly. I think no matter what, you can just tell how committed the ruling class is to holding on beyond any reasonable point of like, the system possibly having a sustainable future whatsoever. You can clearly see their willingness to do horrible things rather than give it up. But that said, all the people, instead of spending all that money on like the survival bunker and the Berkeley water purifier and all the other shit that they buy, the like bucket of food that PragerU will sell you or whatever. If you had some faith in other people and tried, organizing to, I don't know, make things better, then again, you'd have to actually understand what the problem is, and that would involve, critically thinking about your own upbringing and socialization and education. And I think a lot of that is just honestly beyond people. But if that were possible, people could stop preparing for this very individualist, like end of the world, return to like medieval production scenario, and could come together and avoid a lot of these outcomes. I think that people are like rooting for the end, because it would just be easier for them. They would have to change less as an individual for that to come about. And I'm going to quote myself on that because I feel like I just finally, after, I've looked at this shit for a long time. I feel like I finally just sort of put that into words. Articulation, word of the day. Articulation requires them to change. Never underestimate people's stubbornness, to, refuse change, resist change. People will go to crazy lengths to avoid change. And I think that that's, when we're talking about revolution, and then people trying to make assertions like communism is conservative, actually. No, it's actually revolutionary. The exact opposite of conservatism is when things don't change. Revolution is where they change a lot. So yeah. This came up recently in the audiobook, The Vulgarization of the Slogan of Self-Criticism, because Stalin explicitly calls out the conservatism being a weak point in the Bolshevik movement at that point. Not that they were like specifically conservative, but just in general, like, where they have instances of being conservative, it's something that needs to be overcome. Anyway, but so much of this, people are fucking terrified of change. You grow up in the US, you're told that any other way of doing things is like pure death on a platter. Like, just, well, better dead than red. That's where that comes from. Is like the idea that any other system, which again to them being red is like, public libraries or some shit, like any other way is the worst. Like, take your worst nightmare, then amplify it by 20, and you're roughly approximating what it would be like if the US did literally anything differently. That's what they tell you. So people get terrified of change. I think that they wind up wanting just the end of the world, because it sort of requires less of them in terms of like, wait, I have to change my way of thinking from this individualistic bourgeois mindset that's been given to me by my bourgeois capitalist overlords. That's, how I was raised. That's what all the TV shows said, et cetera, et cetera. I've been conditioned into that my whole life. You mean I have to actually question that on a deep level? Well, you do. You really do, actually. But see, that's so terrifying for a lot of people that they can't even get started with it. That's why I recommend meditation to people if you're at all inclined towards it. And there's forms of moving meditation like Tai Chi and related things that you can't sit still. You don't have to because they're moving meditation. Things like that can clear your mind, I think is helpful for sort of understanding dialectical, holistic thinking, as well as just sort of, changing, questioning your values. You realize that, as you sort of detach a bit on a personal level from all this stuff, you can see things more objectively. And that's part of it. A lot of people, though, just have a death grip on, what they were brought up with, the way things used to be, whatever it is, and can't really contemplate the future in a revolutionary way. All right. Back to the chat, and then we'll be wrapping up soon. Somebody says, outdoors you have nearly no risk to get infected with COVID. That's not true. So it depends what kind of a crowd situation you're in. If people are shoved close together, like a line at a theme park, you absolutely, or a restaurant, or, well, that's indoors. But there are, well, actually, it depends, because I have read stories where the only contact somebody had was they went to a cafe, sat 6 feet apart from their person, whoever they're having lunch with, and they got COVID. So that's not true, and don't make statements like that. Viewer from China says, yes, I'm a Chinese. The zero COVID policy hit our economy hard. I don't want to keep it like that because no other countries give a shit about COVID, no matter how hard we do it. Um, unless we close our border like North Korea. Well, no, that's not true. And China actually had very strict controls over people coming into the country. I know because, I mean, if you've seen pictures of what goes on at the airport and on the planes and etc., I mean, and I forget which year this was, but I mean, we're talking about flight attendants in full like hazmat suits. It's not even remotely on par with what was going on in the U.S. Anyway, this is not a commenter I'm familiar with at all. I don't recognize the name, but anyway, the logic doesn't really hold up in here. No other countries give a shit about COVID. Your country has had dramatically more success. Millions of people have been prevented from dying and being injured due to that policy. So I will say something else about you know, one of my friends in China takes what is going on there for granted. The things that they complain about are like, I listen to and I'm just like, okay, try coming to the US for a while because no one, like, people will like fight you if you suggest that they wear a mask. The level of protection that you're getting in China is, don't take it for granted. That's what I'm trying to say. It's dramatically better than you would have anywhere else. And you're talking about the economy. Come on, that's sad. I could go on, but we need to kind of keep it moving here. The mask mandate shit reminds me of Paul Cockshot's description of capitalism. It's only capable of reaction, not forward planning, like a dumb thermostat instead of a smart thermostat. Um, well, yeah, capitalism generally does not plan, not in any sort of overall coordinated way. So yeah, they think about short-term profits, and they think about long-term planning to the extent that they can, but everything is constrained by short-term profits because of the competitiveness, the cutthroat competitiveness of the system. If you're not on top of that, somebody's going to buy you out or something, or just outcompete you, and you'll just fold. So yeah, it's like anything else. But yeah, um, public health policy doesn't mean shit when the average working person in the country is just not a priority. It's not in control of society. At least the labor shortages hurt capitalists. So whether people are organized, class consciousness will be sharpened by supply lines breaking down due to COVID and monkeypox. Yeah, but again, if socialists don't um, organize in this situation for socialism, it's not going to amount to anything. Capitalism can. I was just talking with somebody on Twitter about this who's making this mistake. Um, Capitalism can go through infinite breakdown crises and it will keep reforming itself. It has to be ended. It does not self abolish ever. So, class conscious people have to agitate, educate, and organize for that. This is history we write. If we don't write it, no one else will. So fucking crazy. We're really seeing the capitalist media apparatus in full force. CDC irresponsibility completely solidified that this country's current iteration is irredeemable. No comment. I just agree word for word. I'm pretty sure that the new variants are going to shock people. Well, I fucking hope so. I agree. Well, I hope so. At this point, I don't know. You know, again, people are so committed to the American project of, not letting the terrorists win, whoever the terrorists happen to be, whether the terrorists are a virus, whatever. People will put up with an awful lot of shit. That is just a demonstrated fact. And I'm really hoping that something hits that goddamn, for me, the threshold was exceeded like decades ago. And ever since, I've just been looking around at people like, what is wrong with you? So I hope that they shock people. I think that what's going on now should shock people. It doesn't seem to be. So, yeah, when do we get a mass response from this? When do people hit the streets again? I don't know. I would encourage it, but I don't. But, any organization or party needs to be pushing that as hard as they can. All this talk of like, CPUSA calls anything other than voting for Democrats left adventurism. I'm sorry, but, there is, you look at Bernie Sanders, for example. Bernie consistently, well, actually, I wouldn't put it that way. The way it was often discussed, like this was sort of not a meme, but like just a commonly heard refrain, was that Bernie was underestimating his base or that the base was to the left of Bernie. Now, Bernie was a sheepdog whose goal was never really to rouse people to independent action, but to feed them into the Democratic Party, unfortunately, because that would have been a major breakaway moment. And we might not, we might be in a very different timeline right now had Bernie been serious about working people getting organized for independent action. That's what we needed. Just like Trump got MAGA going, yeah, he fed them into the Republicans, but that's different. They're capable of action within the Republican Party. They're pro-capitalism. It's a different thing. But, at the same time, Bernie could have been rousing people to independent action, either formed a new independent left, blanket coalition party, or joined the Green Party, whatever, which is, oh, I meant to do more about that. A lot of people have asked me about my, like, quote, promotion of the Green Party. What I've said about the Green Party, it's not the greatest party in the world, but it is the minimum baseline for people to get involved with. If you're over the Democratic Party at this point, you're left of the Dems, and you're not organizing at least with the Green Party, then you're wasting time. Just staying unorganized is a waste of time. Now, there are many other left groups out there, but the Green Party is the minimum. It's not controlled by capital. They don't take big corporate donations. It's the same like basic rules as the Bernie campaign. Like they don't take money from big corporations, etc. Big capital does not call the shots. The party is democratically controlled, etc., etc. Now they have a right wing, and there's sock dems and there's hippie capitalists, but there's also socialists in the party. A left wing and a right wing within that party, which is overall left of the Dems. But that's what I was saying. It's the minimum thing that you can do. If you're not even doing that, then don't talk to me, because what are you doing? Nothing. You're doing nothing. You have to organize. As an individual, you can't do anything effective. So anyway, just to clarify that a bit about the Green Party, it's the minimum people should be doing. Minimum. If you're not at least doing that, you're just wasting everyone's time, including your own. Anyway, where was I? talking about Bernie Sanders. Yeah, we could be in a very different moment right now if Bernie had organized people independently. Like I said, there was that refrain of like Bernie underestimates the base or something like that. People are hungry for radical change, but the organization is not happening. I think that that's maybe the bottom line here. But yeah, I don't know what's going to shock people. I really don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's like that thing in Texas, the Uvalde shooting. You look at what the cops did and what they're still doing, hiring lawyers so that they don't have to release the footage and whatever. I think that the sheer fact that like all this is proceeding as it is shows that people are just fucking putting up with it. Is anything going to happen? Like, is anything going to come out of that? That sends the wrong message to the ruling class. Like, I don't want to go down the Chris Hedges road of like, basically being anti-revolution, but, the thing he's always saying is that the people in power have to be afraid of the people they are ruling or whatever. Like basically, we can never do any better than capitalism. You just have the capitalists being afraid of the workers. Well, that's stupid, honestly. But but that's the minimum you could do. Like, and when you don't do anything, and you just let things go by, then then they get the message that there are never consequences. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know what it's going to take, and I hope that at some point, I think I was thinking about this a lot, and obviously all this upsets me greatly. Has for a long time. I've put a lot of thought into this in the last 20 years or so. But I had an insight, I think, into more of the average American mindset, which to me is very alien. And I think the average US American just doesn't care because they really aren't feeling it that badly. There's this big thing in the US. If it didn't happen to me, it really didn't happen. Like they lack empathy, they lack any sort of social like systems thinking. And so they don't understand if it happened to somebody else, it could happen to them. And they don't think about that. And this sort of goes back to the aversion to change of like, if I just keep doing what I'm doing, keep my head down, everything will be fine. And if it's not, then I'll just deal with it then on my own. And like that's like as far as it goes for a lot of people. I think bottom line, like why don't people get out in the streets more is they're just not feeling it to a degree that they can't tune out. They bottom line don't care. So I think that's kind of the country we're living in. There's other layers. There's fear. There is actual oppression of people who have stood up and done things that today might be leading larger organizing efforts, but the cops killed them or they got thrown in jail or something. So there's that too. I think there's a tremendous amount of just people not really caring because it hasn't hit them personally. And even when it does hit them personally, like what will their reaction be? Probably more individualistic nonsense. So all this has to be overcome. Are we going to fix this problem here on today's chat? No. But you definitely could in your party or organization that is doing public outreach and etc. talking about starting a larger national conversation about changing the culture, etc. I understand a lot of the orgs and parties are small too, but I don't know. I mean, these are things that have to be on the agenda eventually. So, have I seen the latest two Prol Cult movies? Scary as fuck. I don't know if I've seen the latest two. I've seen a couple of their recent offerings. They are good, and yes, I recommend people check out Prol Cult, PROLEKULT. They're on YouTube and Twitter. They make good stuff. I think the last thing I saw was their Ukraine thing a few weeks ago. Do I have any plans to do an audiobook on neo-colonialism by Nkrumah? Not right now. So, in fact, I would probably do Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa first. That's kind of the next thing I plan to do on that. I have a lot of other readings, so it's probably not going to be for a while. So, yeah. Prol Cult's Ukraine video has kind of sent me into a bit of a quarter-life crisis, says another commenter. I mean, it should. Oh, yes. Also, support Prol Cult. They lost a lot of financial support after not supporting Russia in this war. So, and they don't support Ukraine either. They take the actual Marxist position of supporting the working class. And, for all the people who've fallen into the West versus the East TM trap, the overwhelming majority of the East is capitalist and always will be unless there's an organized movement for socialism. So that, the global abolition of capitalism remains the task of the working class. This West versus East shit is like Duganist nonsense. Don't go in for that. But anyway, yeah, they lost some support after that from the campus. Actually, you know what? This was also going through my head. Somebody mentioned Brian Becker of PSL also appearing frequently on Breakthrough News. I used to like Breakthrough News a lot. The fucking campism has got to be toned down. Like, it's bad. Lazy, opportunist, lack of analysis. tone it the fuck down. There. That's it. That's all I wanted to say. The campism is running rampant, and it really needs to stop, in my humble opinion. Otherwise, lots of good work. They have a lot of really interesting guests and everything, but this the war, I think, has it's a decisive moment, and you see where people stand on a lot of things. And I think it's nowhere near like CPUSA's level, for example, but that's not to say it's good. And again, want to make the distinction between the CPUSA leadership and apparently 99% of the party, as I mentioned in the last video I put up about that. I've been kind of getting off of CPUSA's case so that the membership, which I know that they had a big influx of new members, could, do something, make some changes in the party. But, when things come up, like everything rests on defeating Trump in November, no, this is like a huge setback, actually, for like socialist messaging. So that's not good. So it's nowhere near on that level, which I know, again, 99% of the party does not agree with. And nobody can seem to figure out why that is, though, the messaging that the most prominent channels of the party are putting out, which seems to me like might want to figure that out. Or maybe realize that, that's not a functional party structure if that's the outcome. But yeah, lazy opportunist campism is not really helping anyone. Anyway, continuing. Yeah, the leader of my union always shuts me down when I say we need to be more proactive because he isn't into, quote, leftist activists, multiple clown emojis. Yeah. That's called social imperialism, social chauvinism. This is like unions are just for never challenging the major status quo, just getting larger crumbs. Now, the correct position is, yes, we agitate for better wages and conditions in the short term, but if we're true to the interests of the working class and not the capitalists with whom we are fighting for better conditions, then we recognize that the end to the capitalist system is actually in our interest. And it goes to show that, union organizing is important, but it does need to be radical and militant as well for it to really go the distance. You just hang out in that social chauvinist, place of like, please give me a greater portion of the spoils of your overseas imperialism. You're breaking solidarity with the rest of the global working class. Not acceptable. It's not revolutionary. Anyway, yeah, bottom line, pro cult, good stuff. Consider supporting them. Because they did lose support. I lost support too. Not quite as much as they did, but I lost some support too over the Russia-Ukraine thing. But this has just been an ongoing battle with the opportunists and the fakers that has been going on since the start of this channel. I think we're finally getting into a point where the core of the audience is just not that anymore, but I'll tell you, in the first 2 years, it was like a constant struggle. Like, as I said at the time, please leave. Please don't be here. I don't want you in the audience. And I don't want to hear your fucking bullshit in the comments. And they stuck around anyway. But I think they're finally mostly gone, and or I've banned them. So whatever the case, things are better now. S4A, do you think this Wolff style co-op BS is being way bigger in the US than Marxism could end up being a massive issue in a few years? I just mean more popular, like over half of US, quote, socialists just want co-ops. So first of all, plug, I have a playlist on the channel called Understanding Richard Wolff, where I did a number of things about this and gave a lot of my personal thoughts and, other theory texts and whatever. Somebody recently left a comment about Wolff, like, their estimation is that they think that Wolff sees a major radical shift coming, but he doesn't really know what direction it's going to go in. And so he just keeps playing the Socialism 101 line. Let me tell you this. I also run a channel. I've been on the landscape for much less time than Richard Wolff, like much less. I mean, this is for 2.5 years. Also, he makes like $120,000 a year on his Patreon the last time I checked, and that's just his Patreon. So, I mean, he has listeners, he has support, he can do this full time, he can hire staff, et cetera, so on and so forth. And I mean, that's let alone his like pensions and like investment portfolio and whatever the fuck else he's got going on. But it's not for lack of resources that he's putting out inferior content, is the point. I also do Socialism 101 stuff. But you know what? You can easily go beyond Socialism 101 and not completely lose people. Easily. Look at what we've done at S4A in the last 2.5 years. It's shameful the stuff Wolff is still putting out. Shameful. But as one of the videos that I did on him shows, he gave an interview in 2002 talking about he was on a mission to redefine Marxism. Now, it was like after the fall of the USSR, he was out to redefine Marxism. The term Marxism is, quote, up for grabs, he said. And so that's what he's doing. He told you what he's going to do. Now he's doing it. Okay? And yeah, he keeps doing this co-op bullshit. He said flat out, well, it's in those videos that I did in that playlist. But like, yeah, he said flat out the typical thing of the party and the collectivizing or nationalizing of major industry and transportation and stuff. That's what they being the reactionaries, that's what they're expecting. And all of their attacks are going to be against that. What we should do instead is promote, grassroots socialism. Dude, you're talking about fucking anarchism. We don't want that. That's not Marxist. Just like, proliferation of small business co-ops. No, there's a reason that the model was the party and the collectivization or nationalization of infrastructure and major industry and things like that, because it worked. You have to get all that stuff not for sale. You got to get it out of the market. You got to get those major things that the economy depends on. You got to get them out of commodity, just the entire for-profit system. You gotta, that's where building communism begins. Okay, this thing that he's pushing of like, let's make a lot of co-ops, this is tinkering around the edges of the system. If it ever got big enough where it was a threat, and I don't think it would, I think that those businesses would either fail, as most small businesses do, or they would get bought out, or there'd be laws passed against them way before they got off the ground. But if they ever got big enough, I mean, it just it would be completely uncoordinated. Also, there's some ways around that. I think he's promoting a terrible strategy is the bottom line. So I think that it could become an issue. Honestly, I think that a lot of those people are very armchair listeners, and I think that it would be fairly easy for the rest of us to out-organize them in terms of real-world action. Plus, I think that the more sincere among them, and I'll count myself in that group, not specifically because of Richard Wolff, but it's just where the left was 10 years ago. And, I gave it the benefit of the doubt at that time. I think that the sincere people will realize, like, how is this supposed to add up to anything meaningful? And they will start coming towards actual Marxism. All the things that Richard Wolff is like, nah, that's what they expect us to do. Yeah, because it works. And like, there's a reason that's why it's like core parts of Marxist-Leninist strategy, actually, for building socialism. Yeah, he's promoting some anarchist bullshit, and that's not good. So is it going to become a problem? First of all, Wolff is still several leaps ahead of Vosh. So I haven't really even said the name Vosh in quite a while, but they're not even on the same level. Vosh is just a fucking Democrat. Wolff at least, is saying like, we need a movement of like militant unions and co-ops, and then some sort of political party like the Green Party. So again, Wolff is better than most of the people out there, but it's not Marxism. If he wasn't calling it that, I'd have less of a problem with it. But there are also problems with the strategy. The thing is that we need to make the actually Marxist world bigger to be alongside what Wolff is doing, and then have a honest and calm dialogue with those people, because I think that they're close to adopting a Marxist position, but we do need to kind of talk them into it more. So I guess the thing with Wolff for me is if he used it as a jumping off point and then talked about other things, would be better. But no, he keeps like that is the message. He has decided on it, and he rarely ever talks about anything else. And that is a crime against his listeners. He is misinforming them. Anyway, some thoughts on Wolff and all that. Bosch, honestly, all he's going to get people to do is join the Democratic Party. That's it, which is obviously a dead end. Do I think of the robbing and general lack of water in the western part of the U.S.? I see virtually no communist agitation on this point. The water wars, I feel, will largely be an economic war against the U.S. working class, where the death toll will be high. On top of this, half the country was told to stay indoors from the heat. It's getting hard out there. Yes, absolutely right. What's the name of the huge aquifer that is under North Texas and Oklahoma and all that? I'm blanking on it, but it's like 70% of the fresh water in the country or something like that is in there. It's getting depleted. There's also groundwater that's being poisoned by fracking fluid, the proprietary blend that there have been court cases trying to figure out all of what's in the fracking fluid. We know it's carcinogenic, but there's like 500 chemicals in there, all of which are toxic and horrible. These are issues where if you don't have an eco-socialist viewpoint, then you're not going to get started. Again, another point for the Green Party there, being specifically about that. You look at, for example, Howie Hawkins' 2020 presidential platform. One of the points under socialist economy was production for use within ecological limits. Yeah, that's kind of a point that people need to be agitating on. Water is fundamental. I don't know. We can't even get the pandemic under control. So, something like water or climate emergency, I don't know. I agree. I agree. It can't be on a YouTube channel to like do this. But this is also like I wanted to do my part to, weigh in on left stuff and improve the quality of the left, like I said before. It started with like shitposting memes on Facebook as like a quote left unity page. If you look at some of the early S4A videos, they still have like black and red flag with a hammer and sickle, which I referred to as like 2/3 communist. Trying to appease the anarchists, it didn't work. Anytime you do anything quote statist, they cannot fucking shut up about it. So yeah, that didn't last. And I was like, well, I know which side I'm on. And so we switched to the regular communist flag. But anyway, it started out as that. And then I was like, hey, we should do audiobooks to sort of go beyond the memes. And, I thought I could do some commentary as well, informed by the audiobooks and, do some current events shit and whatever. I'm a lone rando that has some support from regulars in the community and on Patreon and whatever. I'm not a party. I'm not an organization. Yet my channel is bigger than the CPUSA's channel. It has way more views. And this is not to say that like media is the leading edge. Quite the opposite. Organization is the leading edge. But if organizations aren't also active in the media sphere, spreading their message, who do you think's going to do it for you? Nobody. So if I alone rando can get to, over 8,500 subscribers and a lot of views, like in 2.5 years, you better believe that like an entire party can do that. And, like to PSL's credit, they're doing breakthrough news. I don't know what the relationship is, but it's all PSL people. So like, that's good. But every organization and party should be doing stuff like that. If lone rant, and this is just one channel. There's other channels that have like 20,000, 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 subscribers. If Hakeem can get up to 150,000 subscribers and be reaching that kind of audience, obviously not all 150,000 watch every video. If Second Thought can get 1.4 million subscribers, you better believe like a party of people should be able to do stuff like that too. So, pick it up here, like seriously. Anyway, it's a little rant I've had boiling for a while. But yeah, if this is what randos can do, parties should be doing much, much more. And I welcome and encourage that. Yeah, somebody says, as a former only co-op socialist, I assure you that crowd is the least of your worries. Yeah, I agree. I think that those people are probably the closest to us without being us. So, yeah. My concern is about Wolff keeping those people in that group much longer than they should be, if that makes sense. Yeah, don't let the virus win. Hate to break it to you, but the virus will win. without anti-transmission procedures at max. No, wait a minute. You're talking about interrupting my American lifestyle? Are you a terrorist? But this is how people think, you know. It's like I've said it before, I'll say it again. Old Dead Kennedy's album, "Give Me Convenience or Give Me Death." That's verbatim how a lot of people think. All right. I'm gonna have to wrap it up here. I've been going for a while. We've been going for longer than on a lot of streams. The chat keeps going. So wow, the chat really keeps going. I'm gonna have to pick this up in like a second stream. I know I went for for a long time in the initial thing. There's a lot of chat. So I'm gonna have to come back to this in another stream. I don't know, maybe tomorrow, but we'll pick it up again soon. Um, anything, I feel calmer a little bit about this. Like, no, I mean, COVID's horrible, but you know, just venting that, I think, did something for me. I'm sure 2 days from now, you know, just again, the bad news keeps piling up. It keeps piling up. That's really why I haven't been doing more videos. I honestly could start a second channel where we do nothing but COVID videos. There's enough news that's not getting covered for that. That's really where we're at. But anyway, I am going to leave it here. And of course, as always, thanks to the current patrons whose names are on the screen. I think we just switched a month. There's a few people whose names should be going into yellow. I didn't have time to get into that today, but that'll be updated soon. Thank you for all the support. Again, patreon.com/socialism for all. You can sign up for as little as $2 a month or more, whatever you see fit. It really helps. This, you know, this support has let me spend more time on the channel than I would have been able to do otherwise. So thank you. Also, after the content is produced, with major thanks to the patrons, engagement counts. Once it's on the channel, like it, share it, subscribe it. And that helps spread it, helps it to be recommended to more people who are ready to hear it. And, you know, again, we're trying to improve the quality of the left. When people, you know, think and talk about politics and unions and whatever other problems working people are facing, trying to get people clued in on the background knowledge without just falling into some of the traps and errors. I do think overall the left is improving. So that's the good news. But we're still way behind. I mean, honestly, way behind. It's just we're so far behind the current moment. It's hard to express how far behind we are. The organization is just, you know, the overall level of organization has got to come up dramatically. Personally, I think it's not going to just be one party, but a coalition of parties that is probably going to be the way out for the U.S. left. Something like the Bernie moment, but outside the Democratic Party. Actually, another YouTube channel, Fellow Traveler, recently posted a 11-point set of recommendations for such a coalition, asked me for some input on that. I told him I would give it a look. I haven't been able to get to it yet, but there are people thinking about this topic. And again, we're so far behind where we need to be. It's got to come together and fast. The good news is I think that it can. And there are already signs of improvement. Just got to really continue apace. All right, well, thanks again, and we'll be back to finish up more of the chat relatively soon, though I'm not sure exactly when. But until next time, thanks again, and we'll see you then.